Welcome to Modern Farm Business Podcast. This podcast is designed to help the farm leader bring their business to the next level. We'll cover everything from leadership and finance to strategy and planning. I'm your host, Dean Hefta. If you look at organizations that grow and last over time, one thing that is always present is leadership. But too often, our concept of leadership is clouded by visions of great military generals and bigger-than-life personalities. The truth is, if we have a company or a team that we're responsible for, we better understand leadership. Joining me today to share her insights on this topic is Cy Wakeman. Cy is the author of best-selling Reality-Based Leadership, Ditch the Drama, and Restore Sanity to the Workplace, and Turn Excuses into Results, and her latest book, No Ego. Cy is a New York Times bestselling author and former therapist who speaks from 18 years of her own leadership experience. As a consultant, executive coach, and dynamic keynote speaker, her groundbreaking ideas are featured everywhere from the Wall Street Journal to the New York Times to the Today Show, and is a favorite expert blogger on fastcompany.com and Forbes.com. Welcome to the show, Cy.
Thank you, Dean. My pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about some of your experiences and perspectives when it comes to leadership. And you're best known for the concept of reality-based leadership. Now, people talk about leadership a lot, but what's reality-based leadership and how did you come to that approach?
You know, there's a lot of ideas on what we could do in perfect situations. And what I found out when I became a leader for the first time is that our job wasn't to succeed when things were perfect. Our job was to succeed in our current circumstances. And so many people would say to me, you know, well, if we had more money or more time, or if we had more staff, and it was always like thinking about how great we could be if only our circumstances were different. And I kept having to say, but our reality is, but given our reality, given that we don't have more people today, how can we make it work? Because our success isn't based on our circumstances. Our circumstances aren't the reasons we can't succeed. They're the reality in which we must succeed. So I started to say, you know, based in reality, and it became a reality-based approach so that we could focus on what we could do, not why we couldn't or shouldn't have to.
That's awesome, because it is so easy for us to think about the things that we wish were different. Boy, if we had better farm ground, if we had a better labor pool, we'd have a lot different results. And what helps people over that hurdle of being stuck kind of in, you know, the world they want to have and really getting them to focus on dealing with the world they do have?
You know, as you said, it's so easy for us to wish for different realities or different circumstances. And when we do that, it really just provides us a lot of gas for our BMWs. That's belly aching, moaning, and whining. And we start to collude with one another. And I watch it. I've got farmers in my family, and we can get together. I'm a small business owner, and we can get together and just woe is us. And, you know, gosh, the state of the world today, and we can't get good workers, and the public doesn't understand where their food comes from. And I mean, it goes on and on and on, and we're not supported. And that's just completely wasted energy. In fact, in my research, I show that the average person does exactly that, is in drama 2.5 hours a day at work, 816 hours a year. And this is energy that if we put into, given our reality, how do we make it happen? All that innovation gets wasted when we're focusing on why we can't instead of how we could. And so what I tell people is great leaders manage energy, not people. They manage energy away from why we can't or why we shouldn't have to how we could. So a typical meeting, even if it's just a huddle in the shed, you know, before we're approaching the work of the day, typical meetings go into why this stinks or why we shouldn't have to or what's wrong. And great leaders move that away to what do we want to create today? What do we want to get done? And let's only focus on how we can. So they manage energy, not necessarily people.
So you're in a lot of organizations, around a lot of organizations doing consulting and speaking, and you see these meetings. When you're in a meeting like that and you have this sense like, wow, that person is really leading well right now, I can sense it. what's going on in their mind? What are you sensing, and what do you know that they're thinking about to give that type of leadership experience in that moment?
What I see the best leaders doing is they are always toggling people up from low self to high self. Now, let me explain that. If you imagine that everybody has like this toggle switch on their forehead, right? This binary switch where if it's down, they're in low self, they're venting, complaining, frustrated, blaming. High self is they're innovating, collaborating, working together, coming up with great new ideas. A leader can help with this toggle switch because the same person, the same amazing worker that you have can be on the same day in low self or high self. And it's just like you reach out and you just toggle that switch up. And you do that through not colluding and feeding in and sympathizing and giving your opinion. Oh, I know. And it's difficult. That's horrible. You do that by empathizing. I see you're struggling and then calling for reflection. If we were great right now, what would great look like? What could work? It's always redirecting this energy. And I see leaders moving people out of venting and ego and complaining and into self-reflection and finding where they can have impact and moving forward. And I just like that visual, that toggle switch. So when things are going one direction, a great leader is good at asking a question that gets their team self-reflecting to move the other direction. And one of the things I can really see as a leader is great leaders don't really give a lot of opinions. And you actually kind of lose your right to an opinion when you become a leader, because a lot of times if you're giving your personal opinion, you're making buy-in optional and you're showing people they can opt out. And people come to you for leadership, not collusion or opinions. And a quick story about that, I used to teach that is, if I go into an emergency room and I'm having chest pains and the doctor comes out and he or she says, Cy, what's wrong? And I'm like, I have crushing chest pains. And the doctor goes, oh my gosh, me too. And they ask me, does it go down your left arm? I'm like, yes. And they go, mine too. This happens so many times, especially on small work teams, because we're so informal with one another that we overshare our own opinions or our own concerns or our own troubles with our teams. And they don't have those healthy boundaries, which is just, yep, that's our reality. But why are we suffering? Yep, that's our reality. How can we impact it? And too many leaders go into, that's our reality and I hate it too. And that really is misleading your folks. And I see good leaders just have boundaries and manage that energy and keep people out of that BMW driving.
You touched on almost some myths. You mentioned, it's not about the leader having the opinion or having all the answers. And it feels like we're touching on some maybe myths of leadership. Do you think there's a lot of myths out here about leadership that maybe holds us back from being more effective?
I really do. I really do. In fact, my first book, Reality-Based Leadership, we did a lot of myth busting. Well, in my third book as well, No Ego. So one of the myths of leadership, I'll just give you an example. I blow a lot of them, but within about 3 weeks of someone working with me, because I did a lot of turnarounds, I would go into different areas and turn them around. Somebody would come up to me and they would say, Cy, you play favorites. And I would say, yes, I do. Do you want to be one? And that always took them by surprise because anybody can be my favorite. And I don't play favorites based on race or gender or, things that are immoral and illegal. I play favorites based on how accountable you are, how collaborative you are, how good at change you are. And a lot of times, leaders really feel like they have to work with everyone, and especially small business people hold on to people far longer than they need to because they believe they couldn't find somebody else. And I don't believe you have to work with anyone. In fact, I only work with the willing, and you've got to be willing. I'm not going to work to buy you in. Buy-in's a verb. And so it's a prerequisite to come to your job and be good at change and positive and willing. And I see so many people I work with that are small business that really put up with a lot of drama and emotional expense, because another myth is good people are hard to find. And the real myth is great jobs are hard to find. And you don't have to solve the workforce shortage issue. You just have to, the real shortage is great places for high accountable people to work where they don't have to deal with other people's drama. So there's a lot of myths out there.
I love this concept, work with the willing. And it can be really constraining. As I'm a leader and I think, man, we got all this work to do. And yeah, there's 5 of us and Jim over there just isn't quite cutting the mustard, but if we let Jim go, or there's going to be more work for fewer people. How do you coach that leader to say, here's how you know they just got to go? I mean, what is it?
Yeah.
How do you know who's willing?
I ask them, I go, here's what we're going to be creating this season, or here's how we're going to, operate differently this season. What is your level of willingness on a scale of 1 to 10? How bought in are you to that? And people will be like, I'm not bought in at all. I don't agree with it. I don't think we should have to. It's like, what's your plan to get on board? And they'll maybe say, I don't have one. I'm not going to get on board. Then what's your plan to transition outside my organization? They're like, I'm not going anywhere. I love it here. Then what's your plan to get on board? And they aren't gonna. And I would say to them, then it seems like you think there's this third option where you can stay and sabotage or stay and be negative. And I don't have that third option. There's no third option. You can stay in joy or leave in peace. And I'm not saying this with a way that don't let the door hit you in the butt. But I do really work with a lot of leaders because here's what I know. The same behavior can't please a high accountable and a low accountable at the same time. So if you've got a low accountable and a high accountable, you're going to tick off one of those two people. And who would you rather tick off? And most people want to keep everybody happy, but that's not the reality. You will always be making somebody mad. Why don't you make the right person mad? And so I talk to a lot of people and they're like, Cy, you don't understand, good workers are hard to come by. And the analogy I give them is, one, you're going to be having somebody quit, but you're going to lose your best people by keeping your worst people. But the analogy I give them is if you and I, Dean, are being chased by a tiger, I don't have to beat the tiger. I just have to beat you, right? I just have to run faster than you, not the tiger. So a lot of people, when they think about getting rid of somebody, they think they have to outrun the tiger because there's a shortage of workers. But I really just have to be the best place in my area to work. And one of the ways to be the best place for high accountables to work, my competition isn't the shortage of workers for agricultural enterprises. My competition is all the other jobs right around me. And I don't have to compete through pay because high accountables want low drama places to work where they can come to work and they don't have to listen to anybody complaining. They don't have to be involved in talking poorly about the boss or the family. That they really can come and be part of something great. So what I teach small business people to do is set up something great and then never apologize for incredibly high standards and then attract the high accountables because the true shortage is great places for high accountables to work. And too many times by our settling and dealing with the unwilling, we ruin our workplace and then we go to look for folks. And when they look at the opportunity, they don't want it. And we blame it on the shortage rather than on our environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's awesome. So you've used a word here that I think would be good for us to define how you think about it. And you've used the word accountability. What does that mean when you think about reality-based leadership and accountability?
We've studied accountability. And in fact, we even have a tool that we can measure one's accountability and their value at work. So your value at work is that you're performing currently, you're delivering what the organization needs, not what you like, not what you cherry pick, but you're delivering what the organization needs. And then secondly, you're keeping up with the times, you're staying relevant, you're ready for what's next. So as we get more and more computerization into our equipment, as we get more knowledge about all the elements that go into farming and that you're ready for what's next and that you use those innovations to their full potential. So it's your performance plus your readiness, but your value is not just those two things. It's also compared to your emotional expensiveness. How much of a drama king are you or queen? How much do you resist? And so when we measure accountability, we have 4 factors. One, what's your level of commitment and buy-in? It's a verb. Like, are you willing and leaning forward? And a lot of people don't think of accountability that way, but that's where accountability starts, is a commitment to I'm in and I know the circumstances won't be perfect. And then secondly, that you're resilient, that you stay in spite of challenges, that you stay in and you overcome barriers, that, and farmers of all people, know that, you want to be in the field and it rains. Like, you've got to always be contingency planning. So you're committed, you're resilient, and then you own your consequences. You don't blame your circumstances. You own the good and bad of your choices without, excuses, and that you're involved in continuous learning. So people that are committed, resilient, own their own outcomes and continuously learn from those outcomes. Those are really how we define accountability.
That sounds a little different than maybe when I say a phrase like, Cy, I'm going to hold you accountable.
Yeah.
What goes through your mind when you hear that?
I don't believe we can really hold people accountable. We're just not that powerful. But I believe that we can quit enabling people to not be accountable. And that's different. Like, if you are a high accountable, I can make sure that we have systems and tracking that help keep you on track in your accountability. But I can't make another person do anything, but I can make sure I'm not enabling that person. So a lot of us, let's say we have somebody who's pretty negative on our team. I can't make you positive, but I can quit enabling your negativity. And most people enable by putting like an asterisk by their name. They go, oh my gosh, Alex is really smart in this area. He's really good, with farrowing pigs, but it's like he's unfit for human consumption and nobody wants to work with them. Well, then stop saying Alex is amazing, because a lot of people go, Alex is great. Now, there are some issues that nobody wants to work with him because he's, difficult, but he's amazing. And we definitely want him on the team. And I'm like, how do you define amazing? Did we run out of people who could farrow pigs and also treat people well? And so I think that we enable folks and we disrupt their view of reality, kind of distort it, because we let them off the hook and with things that need to be brought up.
Very cool. Tell us about your latest book, No Ego. What's the real impactful message that you've brought with that?
The message in No Ego is really getting people to look at leadership differently and the cost of this 2.5 hours a day. So 816 hours per year per head count could be recommissioned and put back into results and happiness. And most of us have just decided it's an accepted cost of doing business, and drama doesn't have to be an accepted cost of doing business. So the book is all about helping leaders cut the cost of drama and end entitlement in their organizations. And I'm all for rewarding high accountables for great work. But many of us have found some of our workers have developed this entitlement attitude. And entitlement comes from when we focus on engaging people, creating great workplaces. But engagement without accountability creates entitlement. So the way to really get a workplace without entitlement is to create a great place for high accountables to work and really focus on the high accountable part of the equation. And it gives you lots of tools and techniques, and you'll definitely see leadership differently after you read that book.
Awesome. So I'm leading a farm or a small business. Maybe I have 3 or 4 employees. What are a couple things that I should really be thinking about with my team in my role as a leader?
I believe a leader's role is to help people use good mental processes to think differently. So if drama is emotional waste, the way you get rid of waste is through a good process. And emotional waste, you need good mental processes. So what I teach leaders to do is some techniques that when people are venting and they're telling this big story, I call it editing the story, asking people what is true, what do they know for sure, and then focus them on what they could do next that would add value. So, I call you on the cell phone and I'm like, all I know is that Doug isn't here, and my hunches is he's like smoking cigarettes and he stopped and he's goofing off, and it's absolutely ridiculous because he always does this and he doesn't work as hard as I do and nobody's doing their fair share and I'm surrounded by idiots and this is disaster. Okay. A great leader would say, time out. Let's edit this down. What do you know for sure? And when you really get through, he does this on purpose. We can't know that. I'm surrounded by idiots. Well, half of us have ag degrees from really solid colleges. So that's not true. I'm the one who does all the work around here. That's not true. Like, once you get down to just the facts, by asking people to get out of venting into self-reflecting with a question, what do you know for sure? All we know is that Doug's not where we said we would meet. And then a leader just says, what could you do next that would add value? Well, instead of calling you, I should probably call Doug. That would be awesome. Why don't you call Doug and see where he's at? What great leaders do in these small operations is really keep people out of story and out of all this venting and narrative and really into a place I call stop judging, start helping. I run a small company and our non-negotiable is we don't judge one another. We aren't here to take each other's inventory. We aren't here to focus on other people. We're here to help. And on the back of my people's badge, we have to badge to get in, even though we're a small company. It says, how can I help? And whenever they're judging another, I ask them to grab their badge and go ask the question, how can I help? In fact, when they come to me to tattle, I ask the question, what did you do to help? Back to Doug again. It's like, well, Doug, I saw him back up to that and I knew that wasn't going to work and it was absolutely ridiculous. And we sat there and we just watched him try and get that done. And it probably took him a good 2 hours. And instead of getting in on the story where it's like, I know, and, he's an idiot, including as a great leader, separate yourself out and just say, wait a minute, you saw Doug really struggling with this. What did you do to help? And what could you do now to help? And really get people focused on stop judging, start helping. And I say this now, maybe Doug's an employee that's just not going to work out, but you wouldn't know yet because he right now is getting so scapegoated and ganged up on. And that happens in small companies, right? We have our small group of people who are really not always welcoming of new folks. And so really just insisting that people stop judging, start helping can make a profound difference, especially in a small operation.
Awesome message. Joining me today has been Cy Wakeman, speaker, consultant, and author of Reality-Based Leadership and her newest book, No Ego. Cy, if people want to get more insights from you and stuff you're working on, where should they go?
You've mentioned the books. I have my own podcast called No Ego, and it's on Spotify and all the other places you find podcasts. If you search at Cy Wakeman, CYWAKEMAN, anywhere, follow us on Instagram. I have a Facebook watch show called Life's Messy, Live Happy. Connect with us on LinkedIn. We have our own YouTube channel, /Cy Wakeman. We put tons of videos out there. And we really believe in keeping people well fed. So if you're interested in this, you can get a whole master's degree for free just by binge watching our videos. So when you're out there on those long planting days, tune into my podcast. We'd love to have you.
Awesome. And we'll have links to that in the show notes. Cy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dean. My pleasure.